Welcome back, everyone. This is Jeffrey Reynolds from Reynolds Runabouts. Today's video is going to be me releasing all the shear rub rail or trim. And all of these, I want to take them off and check for rot. And then I want to clean them up both on the boat and on the surface, inside surface of the piece. And then bed that with new adhesive so that any water that gets on this boat, which it is a boat, will not creep down inside these joints and cause any trouble. Remarkably, I've taken one off on the starboard side. No rot. Covered up a lot of interesting joint work. Because this is a molded plywood boat, it came out of a mold, you know, hot and ready to go, and then they trimmed it probably with a router or something, or a plane even then. And then this trim piece up here especially covers up a lot of roughness of a boat. So I'll show that to you when I get that off. I've cleaned all the fastener putty out so that I can get at these heads. Most of them are slot, which is great. It allows me to clean them and get them out. With a few Phillips heads thrown in for good measure, but not very many. So I'm going to start to do that, and then we will take it off and I'll show you what I found. So the rub rail's off. This is what we have left. Really good shape. This is the original wood. Probably not, preserved anyway with seal or anything. Lots of varnish over the years on the top of trim rail. No rot. Square-headed silicone bronze. You can see it's quite well done until you get to about here. You can see it came out of the mold, and it was probably a slight bigger than they wanted it. So somebody came along here with probably a power plane or a hand plane and just trimmed it and got it ready. Maybe the deck was on, and they just trimmed it to the edge of the deck all the way down. So I'm really happy to not to see any rot, but that is not going to prevent me from putting the Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer on it and give it a whole lot more protection, and maybe do something in this joint with some 5200 just to keep the water out under that deck. The trim piece covered quite a bit of roughness, which is what those are for. Hull to deck seams, pretty standard. So I'm going to now move on to the splash rail, which will have its own challenges, and then I'll take the keel off last. I'll get to work. The next step is for me to put the detailed molding that was on here, and then go ahead and do my staining and at least a bunch of varnishing, so that when I do this blue paint and this white paint, should there be a drip, which with draping cloth there shouldn't be, I'll also tape this. It's better to have paint go on to varnish than it is to have varnish go on to bare wood, which hasn't been painted, and if it is even painted, it's going to stain it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this rub rail / shear rail, and I was debating on whether to put a bead of 5200 adhesive in here, but I'm afraid if this ever got broke like this, it would be better to be able to pull it off and fix it than it would be to fix it on the boat, which the spray rail and the keel, that's the attitude I took. So what I ended up getting is a very traditional marine compound called Dolfinite, and it's a bedding compound that goes between wood. It allows you to put it on and get it off. It's it's kind of sticky, but it doesn't adhere like 5200 would be permanently, so very hard to get off. But it will keep the water out, and that's what I'm after. There's a little bit of water damage under here, and there was some under here. So I need to keep the water out, seal it the best I can, but not make it permanent. And I think 4200 and 5200 are just too aggressive for that. And this is the third best, meaning less adhesion. I'm going to go with the traditional Dolfinite and put it on with a putty knife and get this rail back on, and then I'll do these detail pieces. And the squeeze out will be a lot easier. I have to put that rear rail on from the back, or the detail piece from the inside. This I can do from the top, and then I'll put some famo wood mahogany in here, and then it'll get stained. It'll look pretty good. So I get some Dolfinite on my putty knife, and I've taped it. This is where it's going to be either varnish or paint. So I don't want, you know, they say you can paint over this, but I know it's got an oily consistency to it. I don't want it down in here messing with my finishes. So I'm just going to go ahead and right here, I know at this seam is where that rub rail / shear rail trim goes. And I know I can go right up to this tape. And I'm going to put a lot more in there because I know this kind of has a little concave on the back. But I think it'll be a lot easier to do that than to try to put it on the rail and then put it on here. But we'll find out. I'm going to goop it up pretty good, and if I get squeeze out, I can always harvest it for the other side. So here I go. Well, I'm very happy with how that went. I've got great squeeze out all up and down the rail, top and bottom. I'll go ahead and clean that up, put it in a cup, and use it on the other side. I'm not going to put it back into the can. I don't want to contaminate the old can. But it is still pretty pliable. It takes several days to skin over and harden up. So I've got plenty of working time, and I'm really happy with this material. And I'll get back to the other ones. I've got the shear rub rail, trim rail back on, and got it all cleaned up, pulled the tape, and I had a beautiful clean surface that I can put the stain and paint on. And then this project, oh, I got a little squeeze out there I've got to clean up. I think I had to adjust a screw. Something was not good there. Yeah, a little more there. So I'll go ahead and get that cleaned up. And then the next step will be to put these back on. These are the trim pieces that go there. They'll get the same treatment. I'll tape it and then I'll bed it, and this gets to be bikini blue, and then below will be stain and varnish. Finishing up the starboard side of the boat staining. I was ready for it. I went ahead and taped where the paint's going to be. Brought the tape up high on that line because the paint will cover the stain and varnish. So I'd rather go that way than stain and varnish over paint. So I went ahead and taped that. I'm using Lake Oswego gel stain Chris Craft post-war red. It's a dead matte for the boat. And I had to make sure I got something close to the last restorations color, which was probably the same stuff. This boat would have been finished natural, meaning no stain, just varnish on mahogany and then oak. But the inside was stained. That would be a lot of work to take all that off. So the owner decided, let's just match it up to the original stain that was here when I found it. So that's where I'm at. So what I do is I put on the gel stain with a brush, and I go up and down and get into the grain. It's not a filler stain, it's a gel stain, but I treat it like a filler stain where I want to get it into the grain, and then I rub it. Just go ahead and use a cotton rag, and then I rub it, not too hard. I want to try to get it to stain in, you know, especially on this oak, a little bit redder and deeper, darker. So then I just keep going back and I just look at it. If I see any splotching, I'll go and I'll try to rub that in and fade it in. So I'm going to get back to work and call this done. I've got the boat stained on the sides, and I've got this detail. These are mahogany strips that make up the detail between the varnish and mahogany and the bikini blue. And I wanted to treat these on the back. First of all, I stained them because I knew I wanted to do that before. I can always put the bikini blue. This strip is split in half by either stain or blue, and I'll tape that, and then I'll do the blue after I put on several coats of varnish once this is back on the boat, so that I don't have any of that blue getting into the grain and then screwing up my stain. And the varnish will protect that for me. So I stained all of these, just the half, and this one is the bottom edge. And then so I'm going to seal, which will be good for both the paint and the stain. It'll give it some sort of protection that I can't get with Smiths. If I put Smiths on this, I'm afraid it might muddy the stain a little bit, and Steve Smith doesn't suggest you put stain or CPES over stain, even though you can. I'm going to go with the Pettit's brand Easy Wood Sealer. I want to try to keep this boat in the Pettit family short of the Smiths and the epoxy, so I'm going to stick with that. So I'm going to not only seal the top, but the bottom, because the bottom of each one of these that faces the boat, as with the boat, will get a sealer once I get that ready. That way, when I put the Dolfinite bedding compound on here, it will have a barrier between the Dolfinite and the wood and the boat. I didn't show you, but when I put the shear rail on, I put this sealer on there as well. I didn't want to use Smiths in case it messed up that oak look, in case it didn't take stain right, so I wanted to leave it as open as I could. But I did seal the inside edge of each of those shear rub rails so that they would be sealed as I did the boat, so that when the Dolfinite went on there, it didn't soak into the wood. It stays on the outside of each piece and does its job of keeping water out. And if there was any water to get in, it would not get in through that sealer that I had put on it. So Easy Wood is going to go on here, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the boat. I had a few. I found the stain is like primer. You think you got all the divots and imperfections, and then you put the stain on and you see things. So I didn't even see them last night. So what I did is I went on and I just found probably 10, either the fastener hole Famo wood was not completely done well, so I wanted to go ahead and I just slightly put some in there, and I'll go in there and I'll lightly sand, and then I'll go in there very delicately with a wet stained rag and just blend that in. And then I'll go ahead, let that dry again, and then I'll do a full sealer on the sides of the boat and the transom that were both stained. So when I do the sealer, I always, again, like varnish, I treat it like varnish. I went ahead and just put it in another container. I'm using a foam brush. I find the foam brush to be a lot easier. I don't ever get any stray hairs, which is fine. if you plan on sanding it, but I don't plan on resanding this, so I wanted to make sure that they were going to be done the first time. These awkward little animals. So as you can see, I'm going to do both sides, both the natural grain, which will get the bikini blue paint, and the stain. And you have to let your stain, depending on your stain brand, let your stain dry completely. Otherwise, the sealer could pull it and move it and make it muddy. So you don't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do these, and I'll let them dry, and then at some point I'll flip them over and do the bottoms. Probably the thing I'll probably do next is do the bottoms first, because that way these will then dry and you won't have to worry about any sort of marks being on the front. So I'll flip these back over and do the backs first, and then we'll have those done, and then we'll do the sides. I'm ready to put the detail trim back on the side of the boat. I've stained and sealed the varnish part, and I've sealed the open wood part, or bare wood part, that will be painted. The rail is right on the edge here, but instead of having an accident with the Dolfinite bedding compound getting on bare wood, which it doesn't stick, I worry about maybe some of the oils and compounds might transfer into the wood and then maybe muddle up my bikini blue paint. So I went ahead and over sealed that area where this is going to lie. And I'm not going to tape it. It's an incredible curve there, so it's hard to tape good. And I've done a test back here under one of the trim pieces to see if the Dolfinite can be removed easily from the sealed areas, and it can with mineral spirits. So I'll rub it out when I get done. Being very careful to make this nice and neat. This does not have a concave area to it like the upper rub rail and the spray rail, so I won't put a lot of bedding compound in there to make sure the void is filled. I know this is pretty flat. So I'll go in there conservatively and make sure I've got enough, but not too much. And then I'll put that on there. And I have to fasten these from the inside with number 6s and number 6 fasteners. And I'll go ahead and just move my way down until that squeeze out starts to come, and then I'll move on to the forward part. I put these on to make darn sure I was in the right location and make sure that the fastener holes were correct. There were some that were never used on the inside of the boat, and they were Famo wood by the factory. So I have to make sure I have my fasteners in true fastener holes, and that may well have a nice squeeze out. And then when I get done with that, and this dries after about a week, I'll be able to put a little bit of stain on that fillet, if there's any at all, and that way it'll mold in. I think it'll look really nice. It'll blend in really well. I'm using bedding compound because I want this piece to be removable easily. If something ever went wrong, this would be incredibly hard to fix on the boat because of the shapes of the molding. And it's not critical like the spray and keel were to have 3M 5200, which is a very tenacious adhesive. I don't expect these to come off, and they're easy to fix on the boat. Well, I chose to put this oak on with 5200, or excuse me, with Dolfinite bedding compound for the same reason. I think it would be easier to pull this off and fix it, or just replace it, than it would maybe to fix it in place, because of the thickness is so little there that I think it would look a little different than I would hope. So this has Dolfinite. It's skinned over quite nicely. I've tested it with stain and sealer, and it blends right in to the stain and sealer. So I'm really happy to know that that's where it is. So I'm going to get to work putting these on. So I'm getting really nice squeeze out here, so not having a lot was fine with the flat surfaces. And this has a convex, so this is pushing out even more into it. So I've got a nice squeeze out, which means that there's a little bit of a lip probably on each side of that decorative molding that is now full. And what I do is I go back with a filleting tool, which is technically, it's a palette knife you can get at art stores, and you can put any sort of angled fillet on there you want. I'll probably go for the most minimum I can find because I don't want the compound to be prominent. I want it to do its job, but to be like when I use on the spray rails, as 90 degrees as I could so that it has a really nice break so it looks nice and neat. So I'll keep going on that and move to the front. I've got the first rail on, so then I grab a paper towel. Mineral spirits will be the solvent, so you can put some in there. This rail, and I knew this when I started, it has a little bit of screw poke through from the inside. They probably couldn't get the exact depth screw that they needed. I know the rail has a little concave to it, which is probably what hid some of the heads. I will go through and sand those off so that they're not a problem, and then I'll make sure my stain stays in place. Here's the palette knife that I was telling you about. I got it from Amazon. You get a variety of them. And what I do is I find the top edge of my rail, which I know is 90 degrees, and I push on mine. I try not to pull unless I want to fill, and this is where I'm going to fill a little bit in the end. And then you can also do it along the side of the boat, but you want to make sure you're not down in the seam or the groove, or you're digging it out. You're pulling, like right there, I just did it. You're pulling out the goop that you want to stay in. So what I'll do is I'll just go back and push a little bit back in there. I have sealer on this, so that makes it really easy to do mineral spirit cleanup. And I'll just go ahead and push what I just took out by accident, push it back in there, and then rinse and repeat. Down here on the end, I knew I was a little bit short, so I'll just grab up some of this, and as you go along, you'll maybe see gaps, hopefully not. If you see gaps in your seam, you should take your residual or extra that you found in the 1 inch before that and get that cleaned up and then push it down in there. Because the seam compound isn't completely in top and bottom, and I'll have to look on the bottom too, but I'm pretty sure I can see it squeezing out. You're not doing the boat any good. You want to make sure you can see the seam compound squeezing out. Like the 5200, you want to be able to see and know that, hey, I got enough in there to the point where it's pushing it out, so you know you're good. So I'm going to continue to clean this one up, and then I'm going to move on to the front one. I finished cleaning up the starboard side, hull side trim. Went in pretty quick. Some of the fasteners were a little less than accurate, meaning they didn't pull well. So a few of them, including on this side, I countersinked from the inside with a number 8 3/4 inch Frierson head silicon bronze fastener, and that pulled it nice and tight to get that squeeze out. So some of the original screws weren't good. That's pretty normal. I always keep extras in my inventory so I can do that. They look pretty good. I'm going to eventually, when I do the inside of the boat, those will just get varnished. So I'm going to call this step of the restoration complete and end this episode. The next episode you will see a lot of varnish on this, these detail areas that are stained and sealed now. I'm going to put a lot of varnish on this before I put the bikini blue paint on. The bikini blue and the stain meet right in the middle, and this rail is covered with a piece of trim. So I'll get a bunch of varnish on there, and then I'll go back and I'll do the bikini blue so that when I do inevitably slop paint, even though I'll have it taped, it will land on some really thick varnish. I can just wipe it off. So that's kind of how I'm going to do that. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. If you're enjoying the video and would like to give some positive feedback, please hit the like button. I always appreciate that. And I'll see you in a few weeks.